On the morning of November 5th, 1986, in a parking lot on the campus of St. Clair Community College in Port Huron, Michigan, a single shotgun blast is heard just before 9 a.m. 21-year-old student Scott Macklem lay dead by his car. 5 months later, a jury found this man, Frederick Freeman, guilty of the murder, and at the age of 25, he was sentenced to life in prison. To this day, more than 30 years and dozens of court appeals later, Freeman, who has since changed his name to Temujin Kenzu, maintains his innocence. Kenzu spoke to Court TV by phone from prison.
It wasn't until about 4 or 5 months into the jail thing that I really realized I was being framed for murder. These police reports started to come in, and it was just like lie after lie after lie.
Attorneys from the University of Michigan's Innocent Clinic agree and, for more than a decade, have worked to get Kensu's conviction overturned.
Mr. Kensu simply didn't commit this crime, and that's the simple, straightforward answer. And all the complications in the case arise from trying to fit a theory of guilt onto a set of facts that just will not permit that.
For years, police and prosecutors have maintained that the facts of the case and the jury who heard those facts all came to the same conclusion.
The jury heard all that evidence. The jury heard everything he's telling you. And the jury, after hearing sworn testimony and evidence, found Frederick Freeman guilty.
The connection between Freeman and the victim was a woman named Crystal Merrill. She was the fiancée of Scott Macklem when he was killed, but had also previously dated Fred Freeman.
Crystal never claimed that I met Scott till I think her 5th or 6th report. And even then she said I supposedly glared at him across a parking lot for 3 seconds. We didn't talk, no face-to-face contact. I would have no idea what he's driving, just some stories she made up. She couldn't have ever pinned me as having any contact with him, so like 5 or 6 reports later she makes this story up. But even then, there's no conflict between us.
So how did Freeman's name even come up as a suspect?
I think we know what happened here.
Colin Miller is the Associate Dean and Professor of Evidence at the University of South Carolina and producer of the podcast Undisclosed, which examined Freeman's case.
The police go to the hospital on the day of the shooting. They speak to Crystal Merrill, who is the girlfriend of the victim, Scott Macklem, who was shot in this case. And what we know is she had a contentious relationship with Fred Freeman. There's a dispute as to who is at fault, but she puts them on the trail of Fred Freeman. And despite contradictory evidence cropping up throughout the investigation, they just never release him from their sights and they proceed with this prosecution.
At trial, Merrill was a star witness, testifying that Freeman had ninja weapons, could put out contracts to kill people, and that he raped her on their first date. These allegations were not backed up by the evidence, nor were they objected to by Freeman's attorney.
I mean, this was my whole trial. Nothing about the case, nothing about the facts, just beating me up and lying. And they brought pornography and they brought weapons and guns. None of it was mine. And just laid it out on a big table. And for 2 weeks told the jury that I was a ninja and a monster.
All right, let's bring in Ted Rollins because this story has made a lot of noise between the podcast and everything else that's going on with it. And now you're looking at it, Ted. So Kensu, takes a look at this and says, my trial's not fair. That's what I'm hearing from him, right? My attorney, it sounds like he's asleep at the wheel. It's not fair. They're just attacking me. But police and investigators before the trial had to link him to this somehow.
Oh, absolutely. He was a suspect out of the gate because you had this young man who was laying dead in a parking lot. So the first question is, all right, well, who would want to kill him? They go to his fiancée, and she throws out Fred Freeman because this is someone who she used to date, and she thought, well, maybe Fred would want to kill my fiancé, Scott Macklem. That's how it all started. The other thing that the investigator that was hired by the defense at some point says that was in play here was that the victim in this case, Scott McLean, was the son of a mayor in a neighboring town. So there was some pressure to maybe not look into some of the things that this investigator said was out there, that McLean was maybe had some demons that he was battling, and that Freeman was the easy target for them. It made sense. He maybe had a motive. But as you're going to see in part two, there's some major problems with this case.
Yeah, so far I'm not hearing anything to really link him up yet. So let's talk more about the trial now. What was that trial like for Kensu? Because, you know, he's pretty young at the time, right? He's basically a kid in his 20s on trial for murder, the rest of his life at stake here. What was it like for him?
Yeah, he's young, he doesn't have any money, and he's just watching his case implode basically from the defense table. He said it didn't take him long to realize this was an absolute disaster. His attorney, in his opinion, and in many people's opinion, absolutely dropped the ball. Take a listen.
So there used to be a thing in the old days, you could actually like sock your lawyer in front of the jury and you would get a mistrial, right? And all these cops are like, dude, man, just punch him in the face. And I'm like, what do you do? What are you talking about? It's like, yeah, you punch him in the face, you'll get a mistrial and you get to start over. And that actually was a thing. Well, it's not anymore, but it was back then. Now they just restrain you. But the point was, that's how bad things were, where even cops were saying, dude, man, just punch him in the face. It'll bias the jury. You'll get a new jury. You get to start over. And that's how desperate I was.
He didn't punch him in the face, it turned out, and he was convicted. And you're going to find out in part two, Vinny, the details of this case coming up after the break. It is shocking. The evidence that actually leads to Kensu's innocence that wasn't brought in to trial, that's coming up right after the break.